Compliments of the seasons to you and viewers at home. Thank you so much for the question. Yeah, we may start the calendar year, but we have a lot of challenges that we need to address, actually to be addressed by the Department of Education. One is the issue of LTSM that should have been delivered on time, but fortunately we're still on the ground where we're trying to get information whether this has been delivered. Because it's key, you can't start the academic year without the LTSM. Secondly, teachers themselves. We know that there were bulletins, teachers got actually promoted, and some are retired. So there are vacancies that need to be filled, and I believe they should be filled with immediate effect to make sure that we start the academic year in style. We also look at the PPEs. It was once said that the PPEs should be bought by the schools themselves. So there comes in the issue of norms and standards. Section 21 and those in 20. We must make sure that these monies have been actually deposited to make sure that everything actually runs smooth. We can also look at the issue of COVID-19. COVID-19 is still with us. We know that we as the National Teachers Union, safety of our members and teachers in general and safety of learners is very important as well. So we may say it's our priority. So let's have all systems in place that schools adhere to COVID-19. Then we can say, yes, we can start our academic year. But on top of that, one should look at the admission at this time of the year. We know that it remains the challenge in all provinces. Hence, we request that the HOD from all provinces should come up with sustainable solutions in terms of admission. We know it's a policy matter, that is Act 27 of 1996, but let the department try its level best that each and every learner in the Republic of South Africa is actually admitted to avoid any form of hiccups. Yeah. We may also touch on the issue of infrastructure. You know what? Infrastructure is an old story. Before COVID, and COVID actually exposed us as a Republic of South Africa, because we need to adhere to that in terms of social distancing. We cannot compromise that as well. So I think we have learned from the last 2 years that we need to attend to infrastructure to make sure that schooling, teaching and learning actually is taking place in a very acceptable way. Yeah. Therefore, we say if all these have been covered, we'll be happy to say we'll start our academic year.
I want to pick up on 2 points that you have spoken about, and they were pointed out just moments ago by the DG at Basic Education. Linked to the question of admissions, Mr. Malinga, is the figure that has been given by the DG. He says that there is a projected 700,000 learners who may have dropped out of the schooling year. I want you to react to that with what he says, though, is almost an amelioration of this impact. And he says that even though the enrollment figures seem to have increased in 2021 to 13.4 million, do you think there is a major challenge there?
Yes, there is a major challenge. You know what? Especially in our entry level, that is grade 1 and grade 8, you know. Even if we have such a number of dropouts, but you know, birth rate is very high in South Africa, and it is a constitutional right for each and every learner to go to school when he reaches the school-going age. Yeah. So we have a number of people that need to be admitted, especially in grade 1 and grade 8. So despite of that, but we still have a lot of learners. This actually goes back to the issue of teachers.
Yeah.
You know that actually the PPN at schools tallies with the number of learners in schools.
Yeah.
This says to us, we also need to hire more teachers, because as we have more learners entering school level, we also need more teachers to avoid many many learners that do not have teachers in front of them for the whole of the day or for the whole of the year. And we also avoid overcrowding in the classes, because it's one of the things. If we do not have sufficient teachers, it means that we will have more learners in classroom, and that affects teaching and learning directly.
Let's bring into the conversation Xolani Fakude, who has just joined. Mr. Fakude, thanks indeed for making the time. Can I quickly get your reactions as to whether SATU thinks that the 2022 academic year is ready to start? You have heard the officials at Basic Education stating that, well, the schools are ready.
Well, firstly, thank you, Xoli. First, let me greet you. Let me greet the viewers as well, and my fellow panelists there, Sibusiso, that we work with in the sector. Now, as our view, Xoli, as a union is that, by and large, we have learnt a lot as a union. We have learnt a lot as well as a sector, which means that the sector, in our view, has actually developed that particular resilience that was initially required. I mean, we know for a fact instead that, for instance, we had our school principals and school managers from the 5th of January already working very hard to make sure that schools at least are ready when we move towards this space. However, there is an important concept here, which we also need to table in the context of that particular question. There is what we call school readiness, and there is also readiness to learn and teach. Now, these are two concepts, but which are intertwined with each other. When we speak about readiness to learn and readiness to teach, which is also a critical element, that now also speaks to the kind of support mechanisms, the kind of support systems that we have for both learners and for teachers, for instance. The minister made reference in her statement earlier about the psychosocial support services. One of those interventions which are still lacking quite significantly within the sector. And it is one of the issues that we've raised consistently. But now, only as we speak about school readiness, there is one issue which we need also to highlight here. We get worried as a union when the minister says, for instance, that we need to build 3,000 schools. And where do we get the money for 3,000 schools? So we're now averaging about 286 per annum. What that tells you, Xoli, is that indeed we are not necessarily viewing education as an IPEX priority, perhaps. This is a national conversation that we should have. Yeah. This now confirms what we have also been saying as a union, that we are seeing austerity measures coming through the back door. You listen to the DG. The DG says that we've increased the number of learners by about 300,000 learners. And now the question is, have we had a similar increase of educators? Have we had a similar increase of educational infrastructure? So those are some of the conversations that we need to have. But in our view is that by and large, the reports that we're receiving as well is that yes, indeed, there are elements of readiness that are significant within the system. We see them, they are clearing. But of course, as historically, we will always have problems in the historically rural provinces. I mean, right now, we also had floods in some of the provinces, and we'll be wondering as to how then they impact into the capacity and the ability of learners and teachers to access learning and teaching.
I want to latch on the topic of infrastructure. This is schools, and I'm still with you, Mr. Fakude. Mr. Malinga touched on it as well. We were told in this very briefing that school damage as a result of storms and vandalism, there's about 57 of these schools, and so that tells you that there may be challenges for children who are going to be attending to those. But also recently, we have come to learn that all of the buildings that are basically government buildings or buildings that are owned by the state, they are not insured. Parliament, which has burnt down, is not insured. And you have a practice in South Africa, by society as well, where if you're angry with one or two issues at government or municipal level, you go and burn down a school. What would your message be as people who are in the education sector when people get angry as a result of service delivery protest issues and they decide to go and burn down schools, knowing what we know today, that government buildings are not insured?
Yeah. Actually, Xoli, I get excited when you ask this question because you are also giving us an opportunity as a union to also speak about what we call the I Am a School Fan campaign. And really, this is a campaign that says that all of us as stakeholders, we need to take responsibility for what happens in our schooling system. We are saying, Xoli, as a union, that the ones who vandalize schools, the one who enter schools illegally and even steal some of the gadgets, they actually sell them in the very same communities where they are staying, where the schools are. That is why as a union, vehemently, we are saying that we want to really, all stakeholders, we are talking about parents here, because parental involvement in education is important. We are talking about law enforcement agencies. We are also talking about an important factor, about the private sector as well, taking responsibility into some of these national collective challenges that we are facing. You are correct. The example that we are making, by the way, we see in our communities people toiling for potholes. They bend down the schools and they leave the tavern next door. I am not saying that I am against taverns, but I'm saying that this really tells you that we've got a particular collective problem and we need a very significant, quite a radical paradigm shift about how we see education. We need to understand that education is our investment. It is our investment as a nation. It is our investment as well as communities. And therefore, we all need to take responsibility for what happens in and around our schools, because it cannot be correct, Xoli, that we even have got young teachers who are supposed to be entering the schools. They are even very scared. They are saying that, but how do we come and teach where we are not feeling safe ourselves because of the lack of infrastructure, the lack of investment, by the way, towards what we call the National School Safety Framework. So there's a number of issues, Xoli, but it is all about collaboration.